Hey guys, just a heads up, this episode was recorded during our Halloween live stream for Scares That Care that took place on October 30th, 2020. And if you didn't donate, that's fine. There's always time to go and donate to Scares That Care. Just go to scaresthatcare.org/donate-now. They're an incredible charity. Go and look into more about them. And now enjoy this little bonus episode. We've got an hour and 20 minutes before the people at Dark Hills Events take over the stream. And probably one of our most popular segments on the podcast is soundtracking. So we're going to do a soundtracking episode on the Craft soundtrack, which is a very mediocre soundtrack. Oh, shit. It's a pretty mediocre soundtrack. There's songs that I really like, and there's songs that I have already forgotten after just listening to it earlier today. So
yeah, I listened yesterday and I was like, should I take notes? And I'm like,
yeah, it is not of the 90s movie soundtracks that we've talked about. It is not the strongest. And I think they knew so, because we've talked about like movie soundtracks on here sometimes where like it is a stacked card of of like who's who of all of that, but there's a lot of who's that on this list more than who's who. Upset Joshua with that one, but here we go. Let's see. The album starts off, and actually, you know what? I'm going to open up the wiki page real quick, and the only reason I'm doing that is because I'm pretty sure I was telling Scott that this soundtrack is very cover heavy, but it's covers of songs that I didn't know. So I want to make sure that I properly attribute the covers. Okay, so here we go. First track, we've got one of my favorite bands, Our Lady Peace, doing a cover of one of my favorite Beatles songs with Tomorrow Never Knows.
What record was that song on? Because I didn't even know it was a Beatles song.
It's the closing track on, I want to say, Revolver. Yes.
I don't really listen to Revolver very much.
Yeah. So the thing is, Revolver is one of my least favorite Beatles, of like the important Beatles albums. It's probably my least favorite. Yeah. But I love this song because it's got this incredible drum riff that's been like sampled in a ton of songs. I remember it was sampled in a really popular Chemical Brothers song, but it's this really just driving like triple beat on the drum snare, and they continue that with the Our Lady Peace cover. I'll say it right out the gate, this is my favorite song on the soundtrack.
Really, it just felt very like, it's 4 minutes and 13 seconds, and it felt every second of that for me. I was like, so this is my first time actually listening through the soundtrack. Matt sent it over to me yesterday, and I listened through it, and I was just like, there's a reason why I didn't download this, because I mean the songs that I like on it I love, but all those songs where the needle drops in the movie, well, maybe there are more needle drops in the movie, but I don't remember. I mean, I've watched The Craft like 20 times, but you know, but yeah, like some of these songs are not for me at all. I love some Our Lady Peace stuff, but I couldn't get into this song. It felt very repetitive. There's no bridge, you know, like bridges for me, especially with like 90s music that I don't know. I'm like, okay, this song is 4 minutes long. There's got to be a bridge that saves it. There's not.
No, but that's the fault of Lennon and McCartney, not Our Lady Peace in that sense.
Sure.
And I forgot that it is the opening credits song, which I completely forgot. Thank you,
weird.
Joshua.
No, not the opening credits song. The opening credits, the actual credits when they're in the plane, is Love Spit Love, I think.
Maybe. I haven't watched this in a hot minute. I don't remember any of these songs anywhere.
Too, but...
I don't remember any of these songs anywhere in the movie. But let us jump into the next track here, which is Heather Nova with I Have the Touch, which is such a weird, like, this is a thing that we've found out on a lot of these horror soundtracks, is that they just have these weird, like, pseudo folky pop artists just like all over them.
From Rant, like they basically like, here, we'll pay for your studio time if you give us this song. You know, like, I don't think that this woman Heather Nova did much of anything, and this song is my least favorite on this. I think this is my least favorite song on this soundtrack. It is, and it's not in the song as much as it's the way that she sings, because her, oh god, like, listening to this, it was also 4 minutes long. It was 4 minutes and 17 seconds long, and like, all these songs are long as shit. Almost every song is over 4 minutes long on here. But yeah, like, the way that she pronounces words grossed me out. You know,
she has this weird, like, if Lisa Loeb was trying to sing like Alanis Morissette vibe in the way that she sings. Like, it's a very weird vocal performance. It is what it is. So this is followed by a band that I always want to like more than I actually do, with Sponge and All This and Nothing, which is kind of subdued Sponge, which is always the worst.
Yeah,
type
it wasn't
of Sponge.
like, I feel like his voice didn't sound right on this for this song.
Yeah, it's because, like, when I think of Sponge, like, Sponge has been the driving force in a lot of songs that I absolutely love. Like Plowed. We talk about Plowed all the time on this podcast because it is one of the best songs of the 90s. Like, it just drives and it doesn't slow down. And, like, Molly, 16 Candles is like one of the first songs I remembered loving. Like, I was obsessed with that song. And I don't, like, again, I don't dislike Sponge as a band. Like, they've had some bangers for sure, but I definitely feel like they're one of those bands where it's like, if the only album you own by them is Sponge's Greatest Hits, you're not missing anything. Like, there's not like some obscure deep B-side that you just like haven't had introduced into your life. Like, the songs that you know for a good reason, and the songs you don't know, like this, you
Equally
don't know for a really good reason. Yeah. I want Lauren to tell us, she just posted this, I had a dancer pick a song off the soundtrack, and I had to edit the song for a dance competition, Jesus Take the Wheel. I want to know what song from the soundtrack someone picked to dance to, if she can remember, because I'm very curious, because none of these are really dance competition worthy songs. So I don't have any other thoughts on Sponge, but let's talk about a band that, like, should have been bigger. I love them. They might be one of my favorite female fronted bands of the 90s. Letters to Cleo with Dangerous Type. And this song, again, I feel like this is the common theme, is like, this song is not a great example of what this band can do. Like, none of these are like,
really? But, like, dude, Dangerous Type is a great song. I think that you're wrong on that, because, like, this was in a bunch of movies too. It wasn't just in The Craft. And it's like every single time this song comes up in a 90s movie, it's always girls walking in slow motion, right?
So something that's worth calling out, because I already missed this, Joshua just reminded me that I Have the Touch by Heather Nova is a cover of a Peter Gabriel song. And this is a cover of a Cars song. So, and that kind of makes sense. The guitar part, knowing that, the guitar and synth part absolutely makes sense. Like, it's got a Cars vibe for sure at certain parts. And Joshua just threw this at you. He said, I know that Tomorrow Never Ends is the opening credit song, and I'm inclined to believe him since they're doing one of the Craft sequels.
Sure.
But it's a Mandela effect, because I also swore it was the How Soon Is Now for the longest time. So,
but, like, when they're in the plane, I could have sworn that it was How Soon Is Now. I mean, I believe him, but damn, that
Mandela, man. Mandela effect. So like I don't have a ton of thoughts about this, but let's talk about How Soon Is Now, because this is also a very good song on this soundtrack.
Yes.
It's a great cover. It's
Arguably the best song on the soundtrack.
I would agree with that. I'll also say like
objectively best song. I'm not saying your personal favorite.
I feel like this is not a controversial opinion between the two of us, but maybe controversial opinion to the world as a whole. The only Smith song I really truly like is How Soon Is Now. And I've liked every version. Like this is like there's not a ton of covers out there, but I've liked all the versions I've heard of it because it's just a very well-written song. It's got that creepy little guitar lick in the background that keeps popping up. It almost sounds like a siren, the way it's played. Like, just really, really dig it. It was covered by, I'm looking at their wiki page for it right now. It was covered by Everclear? All right. Everclear covered it. The UK band Paradise Lost covered it. Love Spit Love covered it. It appeared on The Craft as well as the Charmed soundtrack and the bonus track on Charmed Book of Shadows. And then also appeared in the trailer for Cruel Intentions and the novel Eleanor and Park. I guess that means that they were listening to it in the book. I don't think books get trailers. So that was weirdly worded. And then the alternative band Snake River Conspiracy also covered it and released it as the single on their debut and only album, where it reached number 38 on the Billboard Modern Rock charts. Tattoo covered it. Crying Spell covered it.
Tattoo.
Yeah, remember them? What a band. Yeah, this is a really great cover of a really, really good theme song. So we got a couple in here. Logan said, wasn't it the Charmed theme song? So it may have actually been the Charmed theme song because I never watched Charmed. But he also says he loves all the Smith songs, even though Morrissey as a person sucks. I think we can agree that Morrissey is... I've seen the memes of like people... I think it was like vegans and it was like listening to Morrissey talk and then like listening to Morrissey talk more and more where like even vegans are like, okay, please stop talking. You're hurting the cause more than helping the cause now.
It's absolutely true.
Joshua reminded us about Tattoo. Don't forget the fake Russian lesbians that were Tattoo. Oh, Megan!
I can't hear him. I can't hear you, Matt.
It's all right. I was just waving. Joshua said, this is why people think that The Craft opens with it, because it was the Charmed theme song. And then Facebook user also said, I love Charms.
I think we should refer to everyone as Facebook user today.
Facebook user. Again, StreamYard.com/Facebook for your name to pop up there. So I'm actually listening to soundtrack in my headphones, and my phone was listening to this entire song because it is just it's a jam. Matthew Sweet, who I know was popular. I don't remember him ever being popular in my mind. Like, he's a dude who's on a ton of albums that I have.
Yeah.
But like, I don't remember ever seeing a music video by Matthew Sweet. But the song Dark Secret on here, it's got like a 60s psychedelic vibe. Like,
that song's so good.
It's not bad. I dig it. I feel like...
I like how you're the one who's lukewarm on these.
Yeah. I feel like this mixed with Tomorrow Never Ends, the whole soundtrack has a very psychedelic vibe to it, which is kind of...
makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes a little sense. But it's different compared to, like, when I think about, like, when we talked about... I Know What You Did Last Summer and like Scream and stuff like the Scream soundtrack, even though it is a very uneven soundtrack that like genre hops all over the place, it is like firmly that genre. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a grunge band doing a grunge song, like a techno artist doing a techno song. This is a lot more of like bringing in these bands to either do covers of very like 60s, 70s, and 80s songs, or doing an original that sounds like it could have been released in the 60s or 70s. Like,
yeah, it's true.
It's very, very trippy for that. So the Witches song is next by Juliana Hatfield.
Yeah, it's okay, you know?
It's got a ton of writers, and I'm trying to figure out what like the original song was. So let's see. Is there a hyperlink for the Witch song? There is not. So it looks like it was by an English singer named Marie Anne Faithfull. She was one of the multiple writers on this song, but it's fine. I never got into Juliana Hatfield.
No.
She appears on. I've talked about it before, but the Saturday morning cartoons soundtrack she pops up on as a duo. I forget who she does the song with, but she does the Banana Split song, and I'm fine with that, you know. But this is, you know, it's not as bad as the Heather Nova song, but it's definitely not. No. I'm not going to revisit this song anytime in my life. So we will jump into a cover of one of my. We'll jump into the fire. Tripping Daisy covering a Harry Nilsson song, and I love Harry Nilsson. I think Harry Nilsson is one of the most.
I don't know who he is.
There is a amazing documentary about Harry Nilsson called "Who Is Harry Nilsson and Why Is Everybody Talking About It?" He was the Beatles' favorite musician. He was this dude in the 60s who had a lot of substance abuse issues. Robin Williams is in the documentary saying that Harry Nilsson was the only partier that he couldn't keep up with. And he was like one of those dudes who would basically like call up someone. He'd say like, he would pull up to like George Harrison's house and be like, "Hey, we're going out." And then you just wouldn't hear from George Harrison for like 2 weeks. Like he would just like take people out into the desert in Las Vegas and just go on benders. But he wrote and performed a lot of huge songs. The biggest song that you would know from him is "Without You." I Can't Live If Living Is Without You. That was his huge hit. But he also wrote "You Put the Lime in the Coconut and Drink Them Both Up." So he would bounce around between like these hyper deep, beautiful songs and like just absolute wacky ass shit. I know one of the songs was like, "I'd rather be dead than wet my bed." But it was like on the same album that had like a song that was like, "You're breaking my heart, you're tearing me apart, so fuck you," which was like a pretty controversial song lyric in 1971. Like,
I could see that, yes.
And that was his radio single. Like he was like, "This is the single for the song for the album." So he was very self-destructive. He was constantly like, he could have been the biggest thing in the world and was always like getting in his own way. But sure. "Jump Into the Fire" is one of his bigger songs, and it's covered by Tripping Daisy, which is as one hit wonder as a 90s band can get. But the lead singer of Tripping Daisy went on to have a fairly successful career doing Polyphonic Spree.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the lead singer of Tripping Daisy is also lead singer of Polyphonic Spree. And, you know, we talked earlier about like optimistic music versus pessimistic music, and Tripping Daisies was definitely a very pessimistic music, whereas like you don't get more optimistic than the Polyphonic Spree. Like that is just music made to like make you want to join a cult. But yeah, it's a fine cover. It is unnecessarily long at almost 6 minutes. Does not
That's
need
like
to be.
Every song on this is just like unnecessarily long.
Yeah, I mean that is the way to describe it. We jump into another folky song, Tool, "Under the Water," but Jewel, "Under the Water," but not very Jewel-like in this one. This is like almost like it's giving a hint to what Jewel would do a couple years later, where she went a lot more poppy and like clubby in her stuff. But like 1996 Jewel, I'm pretty sure this is like Pieces of You era. Yeah, this is like.
Yeah, I would have expected. It was a nice surprise because particularly like Jewel. I like her voice and I like her personality, but not really her music. But this had a little bit more pep to it, and I didn't mind listening to this for 5 minutes. All these songs are so goddamn long.
Yeah. This is, but like, you know what I mean? Like when you think of like Jewel, like I think of like "Who Will Save Your Soul" and "Foolish Games" and like these ballads. This feels more like 10 years later when she was doing like "Am I Standing Still?" Like these like big radio anthems. Like but it's fine. It's nothing special. This is an original for her. She wrote this with with Ralph Saul, who I'm pretty sure put out the record. He always pops up on this. He did guest vocals on the song "I Know" by Save Ferris on the 10 Things I Hate About You soundtrack as well. So I don't know. Dude just like throws himself on these soundtracks that he puts together. So here is a really, really, really weird one. This song's followed by Warning by All Too Much. All Too Much is Ralph Saul's band. But the song is written by the lead singer of Tripping Daisy and Polyphonic Spree. So what I'm thinking happened here is that instead of getting the Tripping Daisy song, they had Tripping Daisy cover a song, and then Ralph Saul covered a Tripping Daisy song, which is
so
just
weird.
Bizarre. It's so
there
bizarre.
Must have been some sort of legal or money financial side to that made sense. But yeah, this is deep cut shit that we'll probably never have answers to.
Probably, and it is what it is. It's just a perfectly acceptable song that I'll never listen to again.
Yeah, it's basically the lukewarm, watered down black tea of with no sugar in it of this soundtrack. I mean, it literally could just be water.
Well, and we've talked about this before. Well, I don't think we've talked about this specifically before, but for the most part, a lot of the soundtracks that we cover on Soundtracking, I know that I will one day go back and re-listen to, but I will almost never listen to maybe one or two songs, but I will never actively re-listen to the soundtrack again.
I mean, you already know the answer to that for me.
Yeah. So let's bump to the shortest song. Blissfully 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Spastica by Elastica. Which,
not the song I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. It's fine. Elastica we did cover on One Hit Thunder, and they are...
Was it
right?
The Connection? Is that... What was that?
Yeah, Connection was their hit. Yeah.
Their hit,
and it's fine.
I love Connection.
Connection's great. Connection's great. I mean, this song's whatever. They have a song that's on the Mallrats soundtrack, which we will definitely cover one day on Soundtracking because that soundtrack is great. But Line Up is also a really good song off of their debut album. But this song is fine. I think the most charming thing is naming it Spastica by Elastica. I almost wish the by Elastica was the official song title. So the next song, I recently did a list of what I considered the greatest songs to ever come out of the 90s. And this was, I'm pretty sure it was in my top 3, which is Space Hog in the Meantime. I just think it's a perfect song.
Yeah.
However,
absolutely.
Their song The Horror off of the Craft soundtrack is not one of the 25 greatest songs of the 90s, but it's probably one of the better songs on this soundtrack. It's got a nice, eerie little vibe to it, and I feel like Space Hog was one of those bands that was almost good enough. They always made these songs that were just on the pinnacle of being great songs, and they just lucked the fuck out within the meantime. But this song
just kind of sounded like In the Meantime to me. It sounded like they were trying to catch that vibe again, and I was just like, it's not a bad song, but I already have. It's that saying why go eat a burger when you have steak at home? Yeah, and that's I will say as I'm listening to these in my headphones though, it's the only song that legitimately has Halloween creepy vibes to it. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. But also, I don't think that The Craft is a legit Halloween movie. I think of it more of it doesn't really sit in Halloween for me. I've said a million times that I'm the kind of person that only thinks about things seasonally. And if something isn't seasonal, then it doesn't have quite as much of a luster to it as like a.
There's an autumn vibe to the Craft just because it feels autumn.
It's in California, so it doesn't feel like. It feels more like, I feel like I might have seen this movie in the spring or summer, so I'm getting warmer. I get warmer weather vibes from it. Plus, it's in California, so that's what I always hated about watching movies growing up in the Midwest, watching horror movies in the Midwest, when they'd be like, yeah, it's Halloween, and there's like, full leaves on the trees, and I'm like,
if you
filmed it in the fucking Midwest.
If you want to talk about weird vibes like that, I'm working on a new podcast with Dylan, who's been on our show before, that's all about Christmas. And of all of the people to come on and talk to us about Christmas caroling, it was Joe Farron of Fright School, where it's like, dude, you lived in Guam and then you lived in San Diego. Like, to me, you can't be caroling if you're not like bundled up with a scarf wrapped around your head and like a cap and like walking around in the snow. Like it's like that to me was such a weird thing to think about. Like that's the thing about any warm weather area. Like you don't get actual holidays like normal people. No, and that's the argument I always. But then, like, you have someone like Brian who, he loves being in his seasonless Florida weather. But it's Megan again.
She's gonna keep coming through during the day, giving me hugs. But she won't be able to hear anything.
I heard Megan hi. I think I heard it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give myself hugs. I got no one to do that over.
He said. I'm
just in a cold basement. Cold basement with the warm embrace of my DVD collection.
No, I want to see Halloween, please.
So it's
real quick side note based on what? He's right there. He's been crying the whole time you're gone. Logan said The Craft is the goth starter kit of the 90s, and it's true. Like, if you haven't watched the Wicca episode of Pen 15 season 2 yet, man, that is the best episode of Pen 15 in my opinion. It is just so perfect. Everything about it is so perfect. And growing up in the 90s when this movie came out, and there was some someone loves Scott. Thanks. Appreciate that, Joshua. I mean, she's a saint for doing it. Somebody's got it. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. But yeah, so growing up in the 90s, this movie made being Wiccan real popular, and when I went to college too, it was like young women were still influenced by The Craft and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show. Those two things created so many Wiccans, and we owe them the world.
It's, what, I was thinking about this as you were saying all that, and I'm thinking about me in the time period that The Craft came out. You know what I mean? So I would have been 10, 11, maybe 12 at the absolute oldest when The Craft came out. And I'm kind of impressed that such a female-focused movie was like so openly embraced by the male horror community as well from like the jump. You know what I mean? Like, because I feel like I was one of those people where like I didn't watch Now and Then because it was like it was a movie for my sisters. Like there was like so much stuff that I wouldn't watch because I'm like, oh, it's starring all girls. It's probably not for me. But like The Craft, I was like, oh, I want to see that. Like the second I saw the trailers, I was like, fuck yes. And I don't really think that it was ever a movie that had any issues winning over its like teen and horror audience from the jump. And I mean, I guess that's the power of something like Scream. And I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Neve Campbell. So, it was The Craft New Line?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, it's, they Dimension and New Line, they just kind of dominated in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And I mean, New Line had Scream, so they had Neve Campbell under contract. They got her. They got Robin Tunney, who went on to do great things. I mean, I don't know anything of. I knew her from Empire Records, but I think I watched Empire Records and The Craft like within 6 months of each other. You know, like Empire Records is like 94, 93. I can't remember, but it was definitely a couple year difference. But I don't know. I just feel like we also had the girl who played Marsha in the Brady Bunch movie, and she was in Demons
Christine
2.
Taylor.
Christine Taylor. So I mean, it's just it has like a lot of young actors that were. It has Skeet Ulrich in it.
I was gonna say this is
It's
peak
got
Skeet Ulrich.
Breckenmeyer.
I forgot that Breckenmeyer was in this.
Is Breckenmeyer
It is.
in
It's
this?
Breckenmeyer. I'm looking at the credits, and I was like, I completely forgot he was in.
Oh
this.
yeah, because he calls Robin Tunney a snail trail, and I didn't know what that meant.
We do have one last song, and it's kind of the weird. So at the time, these soundtracks would always end with a musical score, like one snippet of the musical score. This is the strangest one I think it's at any of these soundtracks have ended with so far. It's Bells, Books, and Candles, and it's a very like South Asian vibe to it. You've got like wind chimes and this just harmonized singing. And what is really strange to me about it is, did you recognize the artist of who composed this particular
That name
score?
is so familiar. And
So
I
it's
know
Graham Reveal. I think is how you pronounce it. But
think so, too.
it is they did the Idle Hands theme that we were like, yo, this is
Thank you.
incredible. Where,
Yep.
where it's like, but like talk about two dramatically different musical styles. Like the Idle
I don't
Hands
know.
thing,
Like I think that the Idle Hands one is like very industrial and gritty and stuff, and this is much cleaner and more world music-y. But I feel like the arrangement style is very similar, in such that they have a lot going on. I don't know. It makes sense for me, at least.
I'm looking at, because this is always fun to take a peek at, I'm looking at what else they scored. And there's a couple horror movie night ones in here. They did the score for the Psycho 4 The Beginning TV movie.
Thanks, Brian.
They did Child's Play 2. They did People
Nice.
Under the Stairs. They did Hand That Rocks the Cradle. They did Boxing Helena. Ghost in the Machine, which I've
Boxing
never...
Helena is so bad.
Yeah, it's a very
Ghost in the
uncomfortable
Machine,
movie.
the anime one from the 90s?
No. That's Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Machine, which is literally...
Ghost in the Shell.
I've never seen Ghost in the Machine, but I remember this trailer distinctly. And it's like similar to Shocker, where it's like serial killer, now a ghost possessing like different things. And I'm pretty sure the trailer shows someone getting killed by a hand dryer in the men's bathroom.
Ghost in the Machine.
Yeah. Let me
Movie.
take a look.
I feel
American
like I had to
Sci
have seen that shit.
about a deceased serial killer with artificial computer intelligence. Starring Karen
I remember
Allen.
the cover. Oh, I have that. I have a VHS copy of that in the basement, I think. If anybody wants to buy that.
I that's been like on the list of like one day I'll watch this. They did the
Karen
soundtrack.
Allen is in it.
Yeah, they did the soundtrack for The Crow. They did the Street Fighter soundtrack, Tank Girl, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. Let's see what else. From Dusk Till Dawn soundtrack, the Crow City of Angels soundtrack, the Spawn soundtrack. Man, we've covered more of this person's soundtrack than I thought. Bride of Chucky, Idle Hands. Oh, Buddy Boy. I thought that was Bubble Boy.
And I've tried to get Bubble Boy on a Patreon episode before, and
got denied.
you know,
Yeah. Freddy versus
I'm-
Jason.
while I'm thinking about it, man, I'm putting that back on my Patreon list. I think that I took it off after it lost twice.
The Ruins. They did the soundtrack for The Ruins. One of my least
One of the
favorite
worst
movies of our
that we've
first
ever
year.
watched.
Yeah, but so I was checking to see if there's any songs that didn't make it onto the soundtrack. I only found two. I found, also in reference to Ghost in the Machine, Chris Robinson says it's tight, and Logan Pop says and he'll buy it. So,
I feel so bad taking Logan's money. He bought like 2 T-shirts, and poor guy.
so the only 2 songs that are on the IMDb soundtrack list that aren't on the actual soundtrack is a song called "Fallen" by Connie Francis.
Connie Francis.
That's
Listen
what,
to learn.
I mean. I feel like that had to be like some retro record. So I'm trying to remember when they were listening to like an old record.
Remember when Feruza's mom, when they get the settlement from her stepdad dying, it's when they buy that condo and all the girls come over, and her mom's like, when I was a little girl, all I wanted was a jukebox that only played Connie Francis records. And one of the girls says, "Who's Connie Francis?" And the mom goes, "Oh, girl, listen and learn." And I didn't know who Connie Francis was in 1996 or whatever when this movie came out. But I'll tell you what, Connie Francis is phenomenal. She's very much like a she's like a 50s crooner. Yeah, like a traditional country crooner, and she's very much like oh God, we just discussed Walking After Midnight, Patsy
Cline.
Patsy Cline, yeah. She and Patsy Cline were like very similar. They were in the same time period. Although I feel like Connie Francis was a little more upbeat because Patsy Cline was I think that she was more womanized than Connie Francis, if that makes sense.
I think that's fair. Also, just want to give a shout out to Lauren Longbottom, the first person to email us a receipt for their donation to Scares That Care. Guys, as much as we love doing this and we're having a blast and it's making it feel at least a semi pang of normalcy this Halloween, just talking with friends about horror movies, don't forget that we are trying to do this for a great cause. So go and hit up scaresthatcare.org/donate-now and make sure that after you make a donation, you go ahead and send your receipt to us at hmnpodcast@gmail.com. And at the end of the night, we will pick a winner for a prize. Thank you again, Lauren, for your donation.
So Tom's comment, he said that the movie is kind of bad when you take off nostalgia goggles, and I don't necessarily agree. Like it's not like I mean, Tom, why don't you post a comment explaining what you think is bad about it, because I think it's a fun movie. Like I liked it in the 90s, and so I don't really feel like it was, like it's not nostalgia because I was jazzed about it. I was into it when it was, current. I think that it's cool because it's got witches, it's got, strong women. It's basically, I think that it actually fits it passes the Bechdel test because they talk about themselves without talking about a man a number of times. I don't know if the whole movie passes muster, but because like Robin Tunney's character is kind of fucked up over Skeet Ulrich, and I think that it's cool too because it shows how evil like toxic masculinity can be, well, maybe one day we'll do a full episode on it, but
it's a stronger, I would say that of that era. I think it's a good movie, and I think if we're talking about like taking off nostalgic goggles, it's a far stronger movie than say I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I loved. And then I remember when we did an episode of it, like I remember feeling very like, oh, this is not as good as I'm liking this because it's reminding me of watching it as a kid, but it's not a good movie. But I don't feel that way about The Craft. I think The Craft is a good movie, and if I discovered it in my 30s, I would have loved it just as much as discovering it in my preteens. Yeah.
I mean, and the biggest thing that I can give to I Know What You Did Last Summer, which is a bad movie, it's arguably the worst of the slashers from that era. It's a weak film. The kills are lame. The acting's bad. The plot's bad. The script's bad. The pacing sucks ass. It's got a great soundtrack though. But the number one thing that I gotta give it credit for is Freddie Prinze Jr.'s hair, which was the reason why he was my fucking style icon, dude. Like Freddie Prinze Jr. and I Know What You Did Last Summer. I can do side by sides to him in that and me when I got my haircut in high school, finally, because like I had the part down the middle, Alfred E. Newman bullshit. in junior high. And then when that movie dropped freshman year of high school, I saw it and I had to look like Freddie Prinze Jr. and I wanted to dress like Randy in Scream. I wanted to, the two of them, they were my style icons growing up. Horror
Nice.
style icons. That's got to be a future Patreon discussion. I think that I may be the only one to talk because Matt's style icons were like the fucking Aquabats, and Brian's was cocaine. But
dude, if you could see, I'm sure I can find it. There is like a shirt that Brian wore in high school that is like a 3XL shirt of Notorious B.I.G. and he would wear it on a regular basis. Like he was all about shirts that like went down to his kneecaps. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, Brian dressed like white trash. About basically until he got sober.
Yeah, and then he upgraded to his Tommy Bahamas.
Hey, I'll take it.
Joshua threw out this really great question, actually. He said, curious, if you can chat about your personal thoughts on the philosophy of soundtracking. Listening to you chat about the craft soundtrack makes me realize that you're right. The songs aren't great on their own, but I love how they work within the context of the film. What makes a great soundtrack when it stands alone from the film? And I think for us, it's the tunes. Like I think the problem,
you gotta have bangers, or else we're not gonna give it
it's gotta have bangers. But I think like I'll use Empire Records and Can't Hardly Wait as two really good examples of this because there are some good standalone tracks on both of those soundtracks. But the flip side of that is I feel like when I listen to that soundtrack, I don't remember when most of those songs pop up in the film. So it has to have that balance of like when you hear that song, like when I hear for Can't Hardly Wait, when I hear Further Down, I remember every single scene that song pops up in.
Yeah.
Or we talked about it earlier with Scream. When I hear Youth of America by Birdbrain, I see that hand dropping that trash on the side of the car while driving to a party. Like it is like ingrained in my head the second that song comes on. This is that moment, and I'm like transported back to it. Whereas like a lot of the time these soundtracks are built on like songs that were just in the background of a scene while something was happening. So those you kind of just have to accept them for face value at that point. So if the song's not like a banger, then it's not going to like stick out quite as much. And then, Logan backed up and said association with the scenes and the songs are used and that holds a special place in our memories. Like I 100%, like I think that there's something to be said about that. But then like the flip side is something where it's like basketball. We talked about basketball. Most of those songs didn't really stick out to us in scenes, but it's like a shit ton of really good pop punk and ska bands at the peak of their career putting out like great songs. And it's like, okay, cool. Like I don't need to remember where the Dickies Nobody But Me cover is in basketball to be like, yo, this song is fucking fire the second it comes up on the soundtrack. Like, so it's all about like, how hard does the song go? Does the song stand on its own? And if the song doesn't stand on its own, how immediately does the song pull a memory out when I hear it?
Yeah. And also, I think that there's a flip side to it where great soundtracks can also be based on, they can stand alone from the film. There are very few of those, in my opinion. But a lot of the times, it's when the needle drops are all within the same genre or kind of like family of genres. And the first thing that comes to mind is Return of the Living Dead, which is just untouchable. It's a phenomenal record. It's basically like a great compilation of 80s punk bands. And it's just, sometimes you get that lightning in a bottle. Like, yeah, there are those great Can't Hardly Waits and I'm trying to think of one of the other ones that we've really loved. Dracula 2000 was actually pretty good. It was a really good soundtrack. But it's divorced from the movie because Dracula 2000 kind of sucks balls. But there's also so maybe there are three kinds. There's the kind where the songs are great because they connect you to the movie. Those scenes where the needle drops happen. There are ones where the songs are great, but the needle drops don't really stick in your mind. And then there's ones like Return of the Living Dead where it's like, I know where Surfing Dead happens. I know where Eyes Without a Face happens. I know where, like Party Time happens. Stuff like that where
I think
you just can't fight it.
Well, as I'm looking at some of the soundtracks that we did, I think sometimes a good hook to the soundtrack helps as well. And what I mean by that is like the Not Another Teen Movie, where every single song is a band covering an 80s song.
Yeah.
Like having some type of thing where it's like, okay, there's like a real hook to this. But like, look, like I'm looking at all the soundtracks we did, and we did Can't Hardly Wait, which was pretty good. Empire Records, which is good, but it's a terrible representation of the songs that should be on that soundtrack. Like there's much better songs in that movie that should be represented in the soundtrack because you associate the song with the scene. You know what I mean? Like Throwing Muse's Snake should absolutely be on the Empire Records soundtrack. And it's insane that it's not. Or the song Seems.
Wasn't that Cranberries song missing from the soundtrack too? When Liv Tyler goes up to the roof.
I think it is on there, but it's like it's just weird. Then we did Dracula 2000. The Idle Hands soundtrack is one I've revisited a lot after we did that soundtracking episode because it is just like good 90s pop punk songs scattered all over it.
What's the Rancid song? Is that Black Lung or is it
Blood Clot?
Blood Clot, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew it was
I'm a bad motherfucker, driving me insane.
Don't you even bother?
But then we did, I know what you did last summer, which we said Bad Movie, great soundtrack. Basketball.
Really great soundtrack.
Varsity Blues was like, to me as a soundtrack.
I didn't love it.
10 Things I Hate About You is another one where it's like strong opening, strong closing, and then the middle is just like really,
that was also
really
one
weird.
Of the ones where they were missing some of the really good needle drops.
And I don't know why the 90s teen flicks were like that because they had a bad case with that. Now, the one that I would swear by, and I think you and Brian felt differently, was the American Werewolf in Paris soundtrack. I love that soundtrack. That soundtrack's just...
It just has a lot of bullshit filler, in my opinion. It's an okay... I mean, I think the movie is better. The movie is better than the soundtrack, whereas a lot of when we do these, it's like, is the soundtrack better than the movie? It's the kind of the question. And I mean, I would say with The Craft, like the movie is way better than the soundtrack.
Yeah, and a few notes that people have thrown up here. Lauren Michelle Buck said, my favorite song drop is the opening scene of Bride of Chucky. When you walk away from a cop car and they start playing Living Dead Girl to the point where I almost fell in love with that song and now have it tattooed on my arm underneath my zombie tattoo. Chris Robertson, who just donated to Scares That Care. Thank you so much, Chris, helping a good cause. Said Dracula 2000 and Queen of Damned movies are trash, but soundtracks kill. And then Logan throwing this out there, not horror movies, but almost every perfect soundtrack are John Hughes movies. And I haven't really dug into the actual soundtracks, but like if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking of songs that I remember from John Hughes movies, yeah, probably. I did want to bounce to something that Joshua mentioned, which is like some movies you just put on because you love the music in the background. Obviously, I love Can't Hardly Wait, but Can't Hardly Wait is that for me sometimes too, where it's like, I'm just going to put this on in the background because every time that a new song plays, I'm going to like want to sing along with it for a little bit. So like, I definitely have those movies, but something that we don't cover, we probably never will cover because it's too hard to discuss. But let me ask you, Scott, do you have musical score soundtracks? And are there any that you like listen to just as like background noise?
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, I think that the Maniac 2012 soundtrack by Rob is the greatest horror soundtrack I've ever found. I absolutely love it. Rob is a phenomenal composer. Plus, Maniac is just such a great movie. One of the best remakes, in my opinion, where the remake far outshines the original, because the original is just kind of gritty and gross, whereas Maniac 2012 with Elijah Wood is it's still gross because he's victimizing women, but it's a much better look at the concept, and it's artfully done. It's beautiful, and the soundtrack just works so well. It's like synthwave, but really, really good. I also really love the Stage Fright soundtrack. That's one that I go back to a good bit. The original soundtrack, '86, I want to say. Um, Also, the 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 Night of the Demons soundtrack, which is a 2-disc vinyl that I have. I love the needle drop side with stuff like Computer Date, I can't even remember what the other songs are, but there's a lot of great stuff on that. But then the orchestral side is fantastic. I mean, and that's really good. The last one I want to mention though is Chopping Mall. Obviously, gotta give a shout out to my boy Chuck Sereno. Chopping Mall is probably has the best theme of any 80s horror movie, like the Chopping Mall theme. And you'll be seeing me play that in a couple hours.
About an hour.
That's definitely that's definitely happening when I do my live set.
So for me, I just started getting into like wanting to buy musical scores for certain movies that I love. And a big one for me is the Beetlejuice score. And obviously, like
Danny Elfman, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Danny Elfman, but I also grew up watching that movie so much that the same way that we talk about hearing certain songs and you remember the exact scene that those songs appeared in, that's the Beetlejuice soundtrack for me. Like every musical cue in that, I'm like, oh, this is where they're like at the dinner table. Like, oh, okay, this is during this moment. Like, so that's a big one. Also, Danny Elfman, not as memorable, but I still enjoy it, is the Frightener soundtrack. It's one of the few Danny Elfman soundtracks that doesn't sound as Danny Elfman-y.
And I had no idea that was Danny Elfman until you told me that earlier today.
Yeah, like, so it's like, okay, that kind of sticks out a little bit. But the other two that I listen to, and one is just beautiful background music for me, is the Casper soundtrack, which is a lot of just instrumental piano pieces. So like that has become like, if I'm writing or studying or like doing something where I want something that's not going to distract me, but will like set a soothing mood, that soundtrack gets put on a lot. And I paid an absurd amount of money to buy the Monster Squad soundtrack, specifically the one that had, no, I bought the CD, the compact disc that had,
because I have it on vinyl too.
Yeah, but like to have Rock Until You Drop and the Monster Rap, because there's a lot that only have one. I think they only have Rock Until You Drop and not the Monster Rap, but I wanted both. But that soundtrack also has, and again, probably like Beetlejuice, where I watched it so much as a kid, but like there are musical cues in that movie that like I can hear the musical cue and be like, oh, this is the scene on the plane. Oh, this is, the opening credits scene. Like if I had on shuffle, I could still tell you what each moment is. And I bought that soundtrack because the opening credit that like the creepiness of that opening score is something I love, but also because I really do think the musical part that plays at the end of that movie when Phoebe lets Frankenstein get sucked into the vortex is like one of the prettiest and like most whimsical sounding like pieces of musical score. Like it's just this beautiful, beautiful thing. Can you tell that I watched Wolfman's Got Nards last night? I finally got to see the documentary. It's amazing. I texted Andre immediately and was like, you have made such a fantastic love letter. And seeing, so I pop in there for like a millisecond. I'm in there for one scene, but I'm excited. I get a lower third. My name's in the closing credits. I ain't complaining. But seeing people from our Facebook page pop up in that movie as well. Seeing Danny Foster show up in there, showing them his garage that's filled with Monster Squad merch, and seeing, I'm going to completely, I think I'm going to say this name properly, but Michelle Sanchez, who posts tons of great artwork and is always commenting in there. She pops up for a couple seconds. Like seeing these people in our community all in this documentary talking about this movie that we absolutely love. It's I can't recommend it enough. Definitely go check it out. So we I would say that at this point, if I was pulling audio to release for a future soundtracking episode on our main feed, we'll be around the part where I cut. So let's do our wrap up thoughts on the Craft soundtrack, and then we can chat a bit until Dark Hills Events joins us.
So why don't you start, get us back on track? Because I feel like you probably have more to say about the soundtrack overall than I do, because I'm just kind of like, it was okay, it was there.
It was, so I would say, if I'm looking at this, I'm gonna look at the soundtrack list. I would say that to me, there's only 4 songs that I would ever really truly revisit as standout tracks. For me, I already said Our Lady Peace, Tomorrow Never Knows, and I am firmly aware that I probably only like that because of how much I love the original by the Beatles, and it's about that drum. If they didn't keep this, the song is all about just the drum piece. How Soon Is Now, the Love Spit Love cover is fantastic. The Matthew Sweet Dark Secret song is really, really good. And even though we kind of like threw a couple pot shots at it, I really do love The Horror by Space Hog. For, like I said, it's the most creepy horror sounding song in the entire soundtrack. And I agree with Scott. It's not really a movie that has a lot of need for creepy horror songs, but like for us picking this soundtrack because it's the day before Halloween, it's the only track that gave me some actual like Halloween vibes while listening to it.
Yeah, it's true. I listened to it yesterday. And I was like, this is just like a pop album, you know?
Yeah.
Except for that one spot.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it's an all right soundtrack made up of bands that I like who I know have done better. Is the way that I'll sum it up. There's not a single song on this soundtrack where I would point to it and be like, oh, most people don't know this, but the best song that this band ever did actually appeared on the Craft soundtrack. Like, no, that's never, I'll never say those words. Like,
well, I mean,
I
like
know,
Love Spit Love, How Soon Is Now, I would say is probably their most famous song, right?
probably, but I also feel like how many people are getting into an in-depth conversation about the discography of Love Spit Love. I was thinking more about like, you know, bands that might come up in conversation like Sponge or Our Lady Peace or Space Hog or any of like Letters to Cleo.
I don't think that people are going to be like, hey, let's have an in-depth conversation about Space Hog. The length of the conversation is, hey, you remember that song In the Meantime? What was that band called?
I have a 45-minute podcast episode that says differently.
Yeah, with someone who is knowledgeable and who
not really
like, did research.
We went into that knowing really nothing about Space Hog, and then the funniest thing was that Chris's bandmate, not from Punchline but from his band Another Cheetah, picked Space Hog, and the manager of Punchline, this guy Jim, is such a big Space Hog fan that his license plate was Space Hog, and he was so upset. He was so upset that someone was talking about Space Hog besides him that as an olive branch, I sent him the episode in advance, and then he recorded a like stinger for the end of it, telling us all the Space Hog tips and information that we completely missed out on when recording our Space Hog episode. But yeah, he was like a hardcore Space Hog fan. But yeah, we had, I mean, it turned into a conversation about where were you when you heard Space Hog?
Yeah.
Like I think that it's a band that represents a time more than they represent themselves.
Yeah. Like, oh, for sure. I mean, I have no desire. It's what's so funny is like, you know, back to Bird Brain, because we talked about it when our mixtape, and we mentioned it a little bit here as well. Youth of America, that song made me want to find more Bird Brain. And I could never find it. I looked at record stores in the 90s when I got to college, and you know, you could get LimeWire or Kazaa or whatever. I would look for it on that, could never find it. I looked for it when, you know, like different kind, like the Pirate Bay and stuff came up, and could never find it. I looked on eBay for CD so that I could rip it to my computer, and I could never find anything. I think that I may have found it at one point in the last 5 years and decided not to download it because I was like, I feel like the expectation is too great now.
As
Um,
as someone who listened to it on Spotify out of curiosity, you are not missing a thing. Youth of America is
exactly.
all you need by Birdbrain. Not that
Yeah,
they
but
were
that's
bad, but they were just generic and forgettable. Like
that
there's
song
no
was
like
their
secret
hit.
banger. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I feel like. Um, it's one of those things where Youth of America was so good that Birdbrain made me want to go listen to more. Or Youth of America was so good that I wanted to go listen to more Birdbrain. Whereas with Space Hog, I love In the Meantime, but not in the sense where I was like, I really want to go find out what else Space Hog has done. Same with like Flagpole Sitta, and
See, now
I don't know.
I would say that I mean,
I
as
know
like
Harvey Danger
the
is a little different because you sent me the
Harvey
rest of the Harvey
Danger,
Danger stuff,
yeah, Harvey Danger
but I
stuff
never
is
sought it out.
yeah, Harvey Danger is one of those interesting bands, and we did a really really nice episode about it on One Hit Thunder. But like Harvey Danger's an interesting band when you think about the song Flagpole Sitta specifically, and realize that all of the dudes in Harvey Danger were music critics growing up in Seattle at the time that grunge music came out, and that the album itself is almost this like very snarky, sarcastic look at like what they thought was a very good idea in the 90s, and then all of these bands from the rest of the United States being like, I'm gonna play grunge, and it being like this watered down version of like something that they held very dear to themselves. So like thinking about that and then really reading the lyrics to Flagpole Sitta, it's like, oh my god, this is such a snarky song
Oh
about like
yeah,
the Generation X attitude, and like how, something that started in earnest became a branding and marketing ploy. Like the I want to pierce my tongue, it doesn't hurt, it feels fine, like
yeah.
just stuff like that. Yeah, I would agree with like doing deep dives into a lot of these bands that had like a song. For the most part, it's better that they're forgotten, but like at
You have a
least
whole podcast about this.
yeah, but at least like Birdbrain, like if you're gonna be known for something, at least it's an original song. Like imagine being like, was the Kula Shaker, where like your biggest
Oh yeah,
song is
did
a
a cover
cover of
Rush.
Deep Purple. Like,
That's
but how about you?
that cover is pretty damn good though.
I would say it's
I know we're
better
not
than the
talking about
original.
that, but yeah, I
It's
wouldn't
better than the
disagree.
original. Yeah.
Man, I
How
fucking
about
love
you?
I Know What You Did Last Summer soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's so good. But yeah, for me, I got three. I got Dangerous Type, How Soon Is Now, and Dark Secret. Those are the only three that I would really take away from this. And those are the songs that I already knew off of it. I mean, I love Letters to Cleo. And I've never disliked the Matthew Sweet song. I'm not gonna I don't like How Soon Is Now enough to go seek out more Love Spit Love though.
No, I feel like Matthew. You just said something about Matthew Sweet, where it's like, yeah, I've only heard like 6 songs by Matthew Sweet, and I've never disliked any of them, but I still never felt a drive to like maybe I'll pick up a Matthew Sweet album sometime. Like it's like no, I'm content with the 6 songs.
Yeah.
But like that's a
There
much
are a lot
higher
of bands
average.
like that.
Yeah. It's crazy though, because that's like a higher average than usual. Like, normally it's like, oh, I've heard these 2 songs by this band, but I don't feel like 6 songs seems to imply that there's probably a lot of other good songs out there by them. But I just never feel the drive. Because I think that nothing's going to be better than Further Down. Like, I think Farther Down is such a perfect.
I think that Dark Secret's a better song.
I think Further Down just
I think
hits.
that your reason for
nostalgia
liking
right there.
Further Down though is yes, exactly. It's the nostalgia factor, and that's totally fine.
Let's see, another 80s mention, Kim Wilde's other stuff besides Kids.
Is it Kids in America or Kids of America?
I think it's Kids in America, and that's from the Clueless. With Clueless soundtrack is definitely something that should be on our list of stuff that we
Is
should
it
talk about.
not in our list?
I don't think it's not on our list. Let me check.
You don't think it's not?
Sorry, I don't think it's on our list. Hey, you know what? While we're just killing time,
I'm putting it on right now.
Yeah, let's take a look. So the soundtracking list right now of soundtracks we've considered picking, and like let's let you guys in the comments let us know if there's any other ones that I'm about to add one because I just thought of something. But we've got American Pie 2, Clueless, Spawn, Shocker, Clerks, Mallrats, the Crow 2 City of Angels, Escape from LA soundtrack, the Super Troopers soundtrack, the Matrix, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, the Transformers movie soundtrack, the Snow Day soundtrack, the first Crow soundtrack, and I'm about to add in the Faculty soundtrack because I can't believe we haven't covered the Faculty.
Yeah. I mean, that's our bread and butter right there. We also haven't done an episode on the Faculty because September has always been, there's a reason why. September has always been Listener Submitted month, and that movie takes place in September. So I've never picked it.
So there you go, listeners. If you ever want to actually get your movie picked for Listener Submitted month, the Faculty is a big freebie that we're waiting for.
Hell yeah, dude. Make us proud. Make us not hate the fact that we do Listener Submitted month and have to watch 4 shit movies that we didn't get to pick. You know? Yeah.
I was thinking about this when we were talking about The Craft and now talking about the Faculty. And I think that as I think about, like, you know, we're in year 6. We're not even entering year 6. It's officially year 6 for the podcast. The way that we pick movies, and for a long time, we were kind of like, not saying that like the obscure was our bread and butter, but like we were definitely trying to shy away from like more mainstream stuff. But I think the difference is, like, if we did something like The Faculty or The Craft, we'd have a ton of stuff to say. Like, we like have like nostalgia tied to it. There's like stuff worth examining, and you can still have fun with those movies because there's like an element of cheese factor underneath the skin of all of them. But then like something like the original Nightmare on Elm Street or the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's like, what's the point? Like I would never want us to talk about. Every other
podcast has discussed this, you know, like it's and there's just a tightrope that we have to walk.
It's a tightrope, but I also think it's like those movies are too good for us. You know what I mean? Like there's no hot new take that we have on like Jaws, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, do I think we could have fun with like the original Friday the 13th? Maybe, but we definitely couldn't have fun with the original Halloween. Like, again, it's like it's too well made. We couldn't have fun with the original Psycho. Like they're too well made. But I think that there are select films where it's like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network. You're listening to the Geekscape Network.